I do like the preload of slides and then just pick from the list if it works, which it appeared to do this time.
But I've been to other sessions where it didn't work, so.
Well, it didn't work on our
You never
interns.
know. Yeah.
Right. All right, it's 9:30.
It's dark here, so turn on the light.
Yeah, not morning for you, is it?
No, it's 4:30 in the afternoon. Which says that it's time to begin.
Yes.
Okay, might as well. So yeah, we've got 32 people in the room. So what we don't have is a note taker. Oh, Russ Housley's there. Okay, good. Okay, so
no, we do have a note taker, right? It's a good bartering system. The note taker is in hand.
Mm-hmm. So welcome everyone. This is the ACME session at IETF112 that is not in Madrid. So I think you've seen this thing. I'm not going to bother reading it out to you. And this is the other half. So, and here's the new thing, living with the COC. We're not going to read that one out to you either. But, we've been asked to, all working group chairs have been asked to display these things at the start of meetings. This is not any commentary on the dynamics of this particular group, which we think are just fine. So hopefully you've read this, and if not, please do so now and follow it. So with that, we can proceed to the agenda. So there's the note will, the COC, already done. We need a minute taker, and Russ Housley, have you volunteered for this, to do this?
I'll be the note taker.
Thank you. As for Jabber Scribe, we usually don't need those in virtual meetings, but just in case, I am following the Jabber room. So if you want anything relayed on the, well, room mic, whatever that means here, just prefix it with Mick and we will read it out. So we'll have the traditional document update, followed by presentations for DTI Node ID, ARI, integrations, subdomains, and then, if we have time, any other business. Any agenda bashing? Okay, not in the Jabber room either. So with that, we can go to document update. So we have a new RFC. Star delegation was published as RFC 9115. So thank you all to Jeroen, Diego, Antonio, and Thomas for doing the work. See that pretty much none of them is here. Yeah, oh well. Not even Thomas. Okay. Anyway, thanks to them. You can watch this, watch me saying thank you on YouTube. So the authority token draft 07, draft 07 was published. We had 06. There's a little additional text, some IANA considerations. It was broken into sections, whereas it was just one large section before, and it's now in IETF last call that lasts until next Monday. Right. The authority token TN auth list was not modified since the last IETF. The end user client and code signing draft got 2 new revisions. Didn't get a lot of discussion on list, got one review, but, well, by a chair, so that doesn't count. All right, so we've had two updates of DTN Node ID. We have ongoing discussions with Roman, and they have a presentation, so not a lot to say about that. Integrations had one new version, also have a presentation, and subdomains also have a presentation, and they've been adopted and resubmitted as a working group draft, so a 0.0 draft. Any comments? Anything I missed? Okay, and with that, we can go to the presentation.
Hey, Yov, I just wanted to kind of repeat our working plan. We have one of the TN auth documents, the auth token documents in last call. We have the other one through last call, but we've had it parked now for a number of months waiting for the other one. So when the authority token draft drops out of IETF last call, I'll be batching both of them and bringing them to the ISG.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so with that, it's time for the DTN Node ID draft. I should have written who's doing them. Brian, I guess, yeah. So could you, do you want to control the slides by yourself?
You can, if you click the little paper icon, you can, there you go, you did it. Perfect.
I think someone needs to authorize. Oh, there it goes. Great. This is going to be short, which is good. So there were two updates, two document updates, but one set of updates since the last IETF and version 0.4. And they're mostly related to the profile that this validation method is supporting, the certificate profile. So the DTN's TCP/CL document is now almost in the auth48 state. And thanks to Russ Housley and others, we were able to get that document into a good state with a new subject alternative name, OID allocation, and that is now reflected in the ACME draft. So before, where it was using the URI SAN form, it is now using a specific bundle EID SAN, and so that was really a search and replace in the ACME document, just using a different certificate field and using a different ACME identifier name to relate to that field. Then there was another change that was made to clarify multi-perspective validation to really make it a first-class use of this validation method in the same way that the HTTP and DNS allow multi-perspective validation and provide some guidance about how to do that and requirements about what must be done in that case. There was a clarification of the node ID definition to be able to just make sure that the ACME server is doing the right logic in the right places and cleaning up client inputs. And then the one structural change was that the previous version of this document updated a 2B RFC from the DTN working group, and those updates have been now moved into a separate document that's awaiting the DTN working group's adoption that will be discussed tomorrow, actually. And so this ACME document now is purely ACME, and it's also at the experimental level, just because this is new behavior, whereas the other updating document is at the standards level. And then there still are 3 remaining typo level issues in the document that I was waiting on after the IETF. One of them is a must not accidentally change to a must. That was a search and replace problem, trying to claim the document. There still are two uses of the URI name in the IANA registrations that need to be replaced by bundled EID. That's a simple fix also. And then the example bundles in Appendix B, this is a very minor nit that they should use a different encoding form for the array, a definite versus indefinite form in CBOR terms, which is also, it doesn't affect the interpretation, it just affects the encoding form. So it's very minor. And then one last open question. This is just in terms of the ACME document for ACME purposes. Right now, the term DTN node ID is used, but in the parlance of DTN itself, it's just called a node ID. This is a little bit different than the bundle endpoint ID, EID. So it's just an open question of what makes the most sense for understanding what's happening. DTN node ID makes it more clear that it's a DTN term, but it could potentially be confusing because a node ID can actually have two different URI forms, an IPN URI or a DTN URI. So DTN is a little overloaded in that it represents both the broad topic area, the working group, and a specific URI form. I don't have really strong feelings about this either way. It's purely a terminology and making sure that people understand what is being referred to, other than just saying node ID. And that's all I have on this topic.
So, questions?
How are you planning to resolve the last one?
For the moment, leaving it as is, just calling it a DTN node ID. So it's just qualifying DTN as in the working group and the topic area, not anything else. I just noticed that in other cases, the EID is called a bundle EID. And this is where the reason why it came up is because I was looking at the challenge types, and like the other challenge types aren't really qualified in the same way. The email challenge type is just called email. The DNS is just called DNS. So this one's a little bit different in that the name is qualified DTN node ID and not just node ID. But it makes no difference other than extra characters.
Mm-hmm. Anything else? Anyone joining the queue? Aaron?
That as I was reading this draft and providing feedback on things like the multi-perspective, it was very helpful to me to have DTN node ID every single time. It's just like, right, it's this thing that I as an ACME person don't need to fully understand. Like I could sort of encapsulate it, and so that nomenclature worked well for me, for whatever that's worth.
Okay, so I'm reading from Roman in the chat that assuming everything is resolved and fixed, it could be in the telechat as soon as December 2nd.
So I think that's for the stir drafts.
Yeah, that's right. So that was my comments. You're exactly right
The
there.
authority token, yeah.
Or for the authority token draft.
The
So the DTN, after we get this straightforward thing resolved, thank you for all the edits, Brian. We can go last call. And so that's going to be at least a 2-week delay. So I haven't looked at the calendar. I think the December 16th telechat is more realistic.
Yeah, that's fine. Good. So we might even have another RFC by next IETF.
The only thing that would hold up the final approval is that this document now relies on the DTN working group document, which has not yet been adopted. So they would end up needing to be in the same cluster in the editor's queue.
Well, yeah, clusters in the editor's queue are a known issue.
Yep. So that's the only complexity.
Okay. So if there's nothing else, then thank you. And next up is Aaron with the ARI. Can you do the sharing thing?
I think the slides are up.
Yep, they are.
Awesome, fantastic. So this draft is completely new from ACME or from IETF 111. I did give a presentation about it at the interim, but I think we had a slightly smaller group there. So hopefully folks have read this draft. I'm not going to be going over the entire thing like I did at the interim. Since that ACME interim, I've published a new version 01 of the draft. I'll go over what's in that in just a moment. We've deployed an initial server implementation in Let's Encrypt staging environment. So code which implements this draft spec is written and deployed. It's not particularly intelligent yet, but it does work and it does abide by the draft. And an initial client implementation in certbot has been begun, but is not yet actually landed in certbot trunk. So that piece is still in progress. Changes since version 0 that was presented at the interim. Based on feedback from that interim meeting, the renewal info URL is now directly constructible from the subscriber certificate. I'll go over that in more detail in just a minute. Other smaller changes, GET is now the only supported protocol. The majority of the ACME endpoints require post as GET, even for idempotent GET-like things. But we don't have to follow that with new extensions to the ACME protocol, with new endpoints being added. And practical experience has shown that that's actually kind of a pain because it makes caching really difficult. And so for things that don't require any authentication, there's no need to carry that forward. And so this says, hey, we're only going to use GET. I've added small pieces of clarifying behavior for how clients should behave in certain circumstances. For example, if they don't get a ARI response at all, if they get a malformed ARI response, if they get a response that doesn't mesh nicely with the frequency at which the client tends to wake up, because as we know, many clients are implemented as cron jobs, not as long-running daemons. And a bunch of small formatting cleanups that are barely worth mentioning. So the renewal info URL, it used to be in draft 00 that a finalized order object, in addition to having a here's where you should go download your certificate from URL, would also have a and here's where you should check for your renewal info URL in it. So a ACME client would finalize an order, save that renewal info URL locally somewhere, cache it, write it to disk, something like that, and then would query that URL over and over again. However, feedback that we got said, caching that URL is kind of a pain for certain kinds of clients, and also external monitoring services would like to be able to construct these URLs directly, and external monitoring services obviously don't have access to order objects. So we've changed it so that the order resource is now completely untouched and unchanged. Instead, we've added a new field to the directory, renewal info, listing the base URL for the renewal info resource type. So any client can fetch the directory and see where renewal info will be surfaced. And then the remainder of the renewal info URL which is just a path blob, effectively. It could be query parameters or something like that, but we're going with a path blob for now, is constructed from case-insensitive hex encodings of the SHA-1 hash of the issuer key, the SHA-1 hash of the issuer name, and the certificate serial number. These are the same components that we use for OCSP, and in particular, mandating SHA-1 hashes is the, oh, I'm forgetting the name of the RFC now, but it's the OCSP for resource constrained or for high volume environments where it mandates SHA-1 instead of allowing the client to specify what hash it's using when it hashes the issuer key and issuer name. So any client that is capable of requesting OCSP is capable of constructing these three parameters, and we have industry-wide acceptance that these three parameters are sufficient to uniquely identify a certificate, and therefore that's what we're going with for uniquely identifying a certificate for this renewal info as well. So you make a GET request to the renewal info base path from the directory, concatenated with these three path elements computed like OCSP, and you get back the same renewal info object that the initial draft 00 had. There's still some open questions. Obviously, more questions might arise as the initial client implementations are written and deployed, but right now the known open questions that I would love feedback for at some point are, one, polling semantics. Right now, as you can see in this response, the renewal info response comes with a retry after header saying, hey, I've given you the renewal info, please don't check back for at least this long. But that only gives us half of the semantics that we actually want. We want to both say, hey, please don't check back for at least, for example, 6 hours. But then we also want to say, but please check back as quickly after 6 hours as you can, because part of the point of this is that we want clients to be checking in frequently so they know instantaneously if their renewal info suggested renewal window has been updated. So thinking about changing the semantics of this, whether we want to continue doing it with a header or whether we want to incorporate the suggested polling window into the renewal info response, whether we want to incorporate it into like the meta section of the directory or something like that. So if people have feedback on that, I would love to hear it. Yes, I see in chat, I see there's been some discussion in chat. I will read that in more detail momentarily, but yes, not quite instantaneously, but as quickly as is reasonable. We've been talking about things like on the order of 6 hours or 1 hour. The second consideration is a larger change. We've been thinking about the idea of there being a callback endpoint, basically a way for clients to say, hey, you told me that I should renew this cert at this time. That's done now. One reason this would be helpful is because in the use case that is one of the motivating use cases for this extension, in the use case that is a CA believes that it is about to revoke a cert, and it wants to give a subscriber an opportunity to renew that cert and have continuity of business before that certificate is revoked. Having this sort of callback endpoint would let the client say, yes, it is safe to revoke this cert now, or it would let the CA determine, yes, I know this cert has been replaced, it is okay for me to revoke it now. We're still just really thinking about this. We don't know if we definitely want to do it. We don't know what we want it to look like, but I would love discussion and feedback on how people think this should look and whether it's worth incorporating as well. And then finally, I don't know how call for adoption works. This is the first document that I've brought to a working group ever. But after the ACME interim, we did have one very kind and generous soul on the mailing list saying that they supported a call for adoption. And so I sort of wanted to put that out there because I don't know how it actually works. But yeah, that's it for me. I would love to take questions, and I will catch up on the chat over here on the side.
So, anybody queuing up with questions? Yes, Rich.
Hiya. Welcome to the IETF. The recommendation, and it can be handled once if the working group adopts this and makes changes, right? Just so you know, adoption means this document's a starting point, right? So obviously it's not frozen. I don't see any reason not to just completely reuse the exact same bytes and calculation that's used for OCSP. Everyone's got an OCSP thing, particularly in places like Let's Encrypt where there's no revocation. So I'd really strongly encourage that. But again, that's more for a post-adoption thing. I think this is nice. The document is pretty well readable, and you did a good job. Thank you.
Thank you. Thank you.
Yes. Anyone else? Do we want to poll how many read the draft? Other than Rich? Okay, so Rich read it and Michael read it.
And I think they can put it in the chat, right? So if you've read it,
yeah,
in the chat, rather than running a real poll.
Yeah, we could. So I think that now that it's been presented in a real working group meeting, we can ask for people to read it on the list and then do a proper adoption call rather than start it now.
Yeah, I'm definitely willing to put forward a new email on the list, opening list-based discussion for these two open questions, and then one for adoption as well.
It's good that people are seeing this. So.
The chairs will handle the adoption call. You don't have to do that.
Right. Of course. Okay, so if there's nothing else, we can move to Owen.
All right, thank you.
Thank you. Let's check. Owen is actually here.
Okay, can you?
A little paper document thing, you can run your own slides.
I'm looking
So it's
at that.
on your little icon thing. There's a little thing that looks like a piece of paper.
Now, like the file in old Windows 3 or something.
Should be up at the top by your.
Yeah, next to the hand icon, between the hand icon and the screen icon.
Oh, you mean just okay? So
just click on it. Yeah.
Okay, I got it. So share my own slides as opposed to you sharing the slide.
Yeah,
oh, sorry. Yeah. Okay, I got it. Yeah, bear with me.
I mean, it's been there since last time, but it actually works today.
Okay.
Yeah.
This will be really, really quick. So draft 5 of ACME integrations. The only changes since draft 4, Russ provided feedback on the mailer for draft 4. That was a major issue with which we knew about, but we hadn't addressed with RFC 7030 CSR attributes gap, we'd relied on using that for the RA to tell the client what subject or SAN to include. RFC 7030 doesn't actually allow that. So there is a draft that that Michael presented at LAMPS earlier on this week that will update RFC 7030 to specify how CSR attributes can be used by an RA to tell a client attribute values that it expects to see included in the CSR request. So the integrations draft is now pointing to the draft that will eventually allow us to specify how to handle specifying a CSR attributes value. And terminology change, I just updated some of the terminology to align more with the RFC 8499 DNS terminology draft rather than the CA Browser Forum terminology. The reason for that being that this draft isn't limited to Web PKI or CA browser use cases alone. So it makes sense to align with the RFC terminology rather than the CA browser terminology. And that is it. That's the only update. So we just need some more reviewers. And now that we've addressed one major issue, we can probably, well, the one major issue will be addressed once the LAMPS draft progresses. But we'll just ask the group for some further reviewers. That's it.
Right. So, Russ?
So I think we're going to see speedy progress on that CSR attributes document, but this one's kind of stalled until we know what that one's going to say, because right now there's a bunch of placeholders in that document as opposed to a full update, right? So my assumption is that we really can't do a full review of this till that one gets done. Is that right?
Yeah, that's fair. Yeah, and the LAMPS draft is a very drafty draft at the moment.
Yes, like something needs to go here. Drafty.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Thanks.
A minute before we can really do another scrub of it, it sounds like.
Well, like it is just one section. Like there's one section in the integrations draft that refers to the CSR attributes draft, but I think the rest of the document, apart from that one section, can be reviewed.
Okay, anyone else? Okay, so we'll send a message to the list that we really want people to review this. And next up is also you, so you can switch your...
Okay.
So you should be able to switch it without There you go.
Again, this will be a very short update. So it's been changes since the previous draft has been adopted. We've made some terminology additions, not terminology changes. We've included the RFC 8499. We've also fixed up some editorial nits. I think it was Aaron provided a bunch of nits on the mailer a while back. We fixed up all those. And the big change, really, the big thing that I want to discuss really is, and I think it was Martin Thompson provided some feedback on the adoption call mailer. He said, well, why are we using domain space, domain namespace, and not subdomains? And actually, the reason why we changed that initially was because there was some feedback on the mailer that subdomains was a bit confusing, but so we changed to domain namespace to be more prescriptive, but it was based on the CA browser definitions. And I think similar to ACME integrations, ACME subdomains is not restricted to Web PKI or CA browser use cases. So I think it probably makes sense to align with the RFC 8499 definitions, and therefore probably makes sense to change the field names in the JSON objects back to what they originally were and back to align with RFC 8499. So that's the biggest thing that I'd like to discuss. We don't need to discuss it here, but just some consensus on the mailer as to which terminology set to lean towards. I think I'm actually leaning towards RFC 8499, not the CA browser stuff. And that is it. That's the last slide. Very, very quick update. The biggest, so there's no substantive changes. The only thing you would need to close on is terminology.
So I know this is a newly adopted thing, but it's actually a pretty old draft. Just stayed individual for a long time. How far do you think it is from completion?
I don't think it's far from for completion at all. It's very close. Like there's been a lot of discussion on the mailer over and back. It's been very bursty, but a lot of discussion on the mailer about the details of the draft over the last 18 months. So I think it's actually close to completion, but just the terminology is the one thing that you close on. But leaving the terminology aside, I think the structures of the structure of the protocol enhancements, the actual fields routing to the JSON, I think is pretty close to complete. We haven't got any substantive feedback that needs to be changed over what's currently there, apart from maybe changing the terminology.
Good. So, anyone else getting in the queue? No. Okay. So, thank you, Owen.
Okay, thank you.
If you stop sharing, yeah, then I can go back to the share slides, and I think we're done with our agenda. Right. Okay. So
then the question is, do you want to talk about, what do you call those things?
milestones.
That one. That's the
Yeah.
one.
Let's start with if there's any other business, and then
Real AOB? Okay.
Well, we've got 25 minutes, so we're probably going to have time. So, anything else? Please get in the queue. Okay, seems like nothing and nobody. There's one thing about the client certs, and we tried to stir up interest, and well, there was just nothing on the list.
There we go.
That would get you. Yes, Kathleen.
It seemed like you were asking for me to speak with that. So I have been working with a few people off list, and there should be some text contributions to expand the use cases, or I'm sorry, not the use cases, the challenge types for a code signing certificate effort that has been, I guess it was announced a few months back, but they use their own method instead of ACME. And so this would allow them to switch over to ACME. And so not to create yet another automated certificate protocol that vendors would have to support. So you should see some more to come on that. And this was just raised in GNAP as well for one of their use cases that they were trying to figure out a way to solve, because that effort has very short, the code signing cert effort has very short-lived certificates, like in the matter of seconds, so that they can only be used once. And that might work for GNAP too, but we'll have to see what happens. So you might see more, and we'll see. Obviously the draft should only go forward if there is real interest, but it seems like a widely used effort in the Linux consortium. They are looking to switch over and extend this draft and use ACME as a result. So that would be a big implementation as well with many vendors.
Okay, thank you.
Yep, thank you.
So now I'll stop sharing the slides and start sharing the milestones. Yes, Chrome tab and milestones, yes. Okay. So, yeah, that's the milestones that we have, and obviously all of the milestones that are not marked as done are marked with dates that are in the past. So we should probably fix the April 2021 of Delay to Network and the ACME integration. As for the user, client, and code signing, well, we neither submitted it to the ISG nor abandoned it, so it's kind of awaiting adoption still. So, Roman, do you care to say what you think we should do with this?
Can we just have people that are authoring the drafts pick dates?
That's the kind of recommendation I'd be looking for.
Yeah, I mean, I think DTN is really might as well pick December, and as for the integrations, well, maybe next March. Add the subdomains on top of that. The TN
So
off
subdomains and integration drafts aren't linked together, are they?
no, they're not.
So you could do subdomains in the spring. It sounds like the integration draft has a little bit to go with the LAMPS draft in tandem.
And then maybe we want, well, it's too early to add a milestone for ARI because we haven't decided that we want it still, but that might be the next, well, just before the next IETF.
So what, Kathleen, do you have a date when you would expect to see the client or code signing things solidified?
I would expect before the next meeting cycle. I'm supposed to get text within the next week or two from this other effort, and I can sync up with the GNAP folks pretty easily too to see if it works for them once they have a little bit more time to review. So I think by the next meeting we should be ready for working group last call if there's traction and it gets used for these use cases.
So we might as well set it to July 2022.
Yes.
You may as well,
ISG
and hopefully
submission.
hopefully we can overshoot it because the code for that other effort is coming soon. It's underway, so yeah.
Okay, that sounds like a plan.
I mean, are these milestones more than just like sticking your finger in the air and making a guess? I mean, what happens when you, I mean, obviously we've missed them, so.
Oh, you just reset them, but I mean, you try. So that's why I'm saying I'm hoping for working group last call by the next meeting, but I guess Yoav has had experience that says it should go longer. So whatever you want to do is fine. I'm going to try to overshoot it.
Yeah, I mean, the milestone is for submitting to the ISG, so that obviously takes a little more time than just the working group last call. Okay, so unless I'm mistaken, I think this is all we have for today. So, asking one more time, is there anything else? Going once, going twice. Thank you all for attending the meeting, and I'll hopefully see you next time.
Unless, do you want to have an interim?
That's a tough question. Only if we have something very specific to discuss in the interim, like if there's a lot more client content or something really new about ARI that comes up in a potential adoption call.
Okay. Thank you.
Okay. So, thank you all.
Okay, your notes are in the Code EMD.
Thank you very much, Russ.
Thanks for the people who augmented what I put in there.
Okay, so goodbye.